this is David Sereda. We're here with Shamanic Diets and Tomaz Mueller. Hi, how are you?
Hi. I'm good, thanks. And you?
Nice to meet you.
Oh my.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi. Wow. So nice to see you.
Are you in your clinic right now, Shamim?
Yes, I'm here in the clinic.
I just want to show you as well. Look, this is, can you see my little corner here?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Oh yeah, there's the coil, yeah.
So this is the one that I have to give back to Dr. Daya tomorrow.
We're having a discussion about some of the data and benefits and progress that both Shamim and Tomaz have had with their practice and their healing practice. And today it's very sensitive because you can't legally say cure. Even though we have very positive data, we can share our data, what we're actually finding. But first, Shamim, can you describe how long you've been using the products, you know, the coils and the wands, etc., with your clients and some of what you're experiencing?
Well, I guess I purchased the package back in September 2019, and I think it took a while to figure out how to put it together and use it correctly. So I've used it on a few patients, you know, but it's hard for them to feel directly what's coming through the coil and the wand. So it's more subtle and indirect as a treatment. But what's excited me is just using the mantra coil in the clinic to be able to run healing frequencies just in the environment.
Yeah, it's passive. You know, you can't directly cognitively understand what's happening in an energy field, and unless a person is trained and very sensitive. I mean, if you put a magnet next to the coil, you can physically feel the vibrations, but it's happening. And when we say subtle, you know, most alternative medicine and homeopathy is subtle. It's subtle energy, but subtle energy means it's very deeply penetrating, but yet you can't cognitively say, yes, I know this is happening. I mean, my nervous system can feel the coils and the wands. I get tingling sensations in the brain and the nervous system with different frequencies, and I can feel the energies. But I'm a trained meditator of 40 years, so it just depends. And some people are naturally sensitive. They don't even necessarily have to have a lot of training. And I also notice children respond incredibly well to the technology. And I do experiments with my own children, not like a mad scientist experiment, but I can see when I run frequencies at night before bed, my children will report amazing dreams and things behind sleep. And Tomaz, describe what kind of a practitioner you are and how you've used the coils.
Okay. I'm trained in Ayurvedic medicine. I have my training. I've been in the field of Ayurveda, let's say, for over 30 years. Wow. And my journey started by actually exploring consciousness. So basically also I've been meditating since 1988 pretty much regularly. And from the very early times of 2000, when I first sort of got a glimpse of frequency medicine or the use of frequencies, I felt very excited. And I have been using frequencies in my clinical practice really regularly. 2012, so it's about 8 years pretty much. And so even though I'm trained as an Ayurvedic practitioner with my degree or qualification in Ayurvedic medicine, my main approach is really to understand and explore consciousness. And because we are human beings as energies and frequencies in motions, energies in motion that take a particular shape or form. And when I did the research for my book, around 2012, 2013, I stumbled across the Rifer frequencies. So, and it's only when Dr. Daya kindly allowed me during the lockdown at the beginning of April to borrow one of her mantra coils, when the whole work with regards to frequencies took another dimension. I'm saying that because I've been using the so-called solfeggio frequencies and some Rifer frequency and other units where I work with gemstones, so precious gemstones such as diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and using frequency light that is being passed through those on the Ayurvedic marma points or energy points for many years. But when Dr. Daya said to me about actually it was the staff of Moses that got me completely excited, because I truly believe that this is the medicine of the future. This is the approach of the future. And it was almost like, oh my God, finally there is something or someone like yourself, and I really truly mean it, it's come from my heart, that actually understands the value of frequencies, understands this ancient knowledge. And personally, I feel I'm fairly connected to consciousness and the energy of spirit, and being able to do some energetic work myself for my patients. Your frequencies have really added another dimension. So basically, Dr. Daya said, okay, because we are in lockdown, I'm not using the clinic coil, and you can borrow it of me. So I've been working with the coil for about 4 months now, 3.5 months, April, May, June, July. Yeah, it's about 3.5 months. And because of the lockdown, I had completely to rechange the way of how I operate. I've done energetic healing work in the past, but now, because of your work with the mantra coil, I'm able to really target more specific the people I work with. So the process that I do is I use the image of the person and place an image of it on the mantra coil, but then also get some genetic material such as hair sample or a nail clip, and actually add that onto the coil. But my work is purely remotely. So the only thing that I'm saying is to people, okay, I want you to lie down at this and this time, give them some breathing practice, and then I tune into the energy with the help of the frequencies and the coil. And I can only say, in terms of my own personal experience, it's that tingling sensation where I feel I am connected, and naturally I can sense the impact of the frequencies, which is, it just has, maybe I guess because I've worked with frequencies for quite a while, I can sort of sense what they do and where they work in the body. But having worked with solfeggio frequencies and having worked with your frequencies, I truly felt initially, I always go by my gut feeling, this is something special and you have to dive into it. But then when you actually experience the difference, and I did it because I played back and forth my frequencies on my iTunes player, and then used the same frequencies that are on the device that I got from Dr. Daya, basically your device, and I can feel the strength. It really amplifies the effect. And then what people say, for example, when I go and dive into the quantum healing and I feel there needs to be some energy or some work done on the thyroid, or maybe something with regards to digestion and liver, I can access that using your frequencies through the coil. And people have no idea where we are working on. We, in the sense, you know, higher self and my own consciousness. And then they give me reports and say, oh, has he done something on my throat area? Or I could feel something on my liver.
Wow.
Or something has happened there. And this is by people, even my brother, and you know, he has been the most skeptical person. Many years ago, he was the one, when I started meditating, he dragged me to a priest because he thought I need to have exorcism because meditation was something evil. This goes back 30 years ago. And I just asked him, okay, let's just, because we have had time, let's just explore. I will give you a quantum healing. I will work with the frequencies. And he could really feel a change, and something is shifting. And like you said, David, it's so subtle and it's so difficult to explain. So because we have gone into lockdown mode, I haven't worked with patients one-to-one. And to be quite honest, with my work as a healer, when it comes to energetic work, it doesn't quite fit the picture to work with a mask, to work with sanitary gloves and everything. So I'm purely moving into, or have moved into, the quantum healing side of it. And God knows how long.
On the quantum healing side of it, just for an explanation, because you mentioned you use hair samples, and I know from the work of Ruth Drown and radionics, you can take blood on a coffee filter paper, unbleached, or hair. And through quantum communication, your DNA can communicate with you, if it's separate from you, faster than the speed of light, through Einstein's action at a distance. And through the quantum field, if you're vibrating somebody's DNA, it's absolutely proprietary to that person. It won't get mixed up and go to the neighbor or somebody else. And so this isn't pie in the sky. This is true quantum established theory in action.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
And Tomaz and I were talking the other day too, that I noticed when you just showed your mantra coil, that if you place a crystal on the coil, and it only takes 5 minutes to do this, it will hold the vibrations, I found, for about an hour.
Yes.
And the person can then work with that crystal, and they can feel the energies in the crystal. And that's because quartz crystal has an infinite number of electron holes in it, where electrons spin and bubble up onto the surface of the quartz, which really makes it a potential energy source in the future. I mean, this is an established fact. But there's a quantum function to the electron holes in a crystal as well. And so when you're holding a crystal that's been vibrated, it interacts with your energy field, and can also be added through the phenomenon of action at a distance. But there's one added step we talked about yesterday, is if you place this in a pot of boiling water, or you use an electric heat pad, if you heat the crystal up and then treat it, you'll get better results. And that's because the pyroelectric effect, which is the heat electric effect in crystals, is very prominent. And then therefore the crystal will be energized and go on the coil. But it seems to stay for about an hour, whereas the technique I use to treat, the pendants that I have, and also like my bracelet here has an aquamarine in it that's been treated, is a much more powerful technology. But the other thing that we talked about yesterday is the ability to place herbal medicine in the coil. So whether it's a coil bed or one of the mantra coils, if you place a tea bag of herbs or freshly picked flowers, because flowers are incredible, roses have an incredible smoothing effect on the heart energy field. I don't want to say the heart chakra local, because the heart has an energy field, and I find roses have a really incredible effect. And I'll even place, like I'm drinking yerba mate and milk here, I'll even place that on the coil for 5 minutes, and I will notice a huge difference.
David, apologies to interrupt, but you got me all excited when you started talking about the rose. I'd just like to share experience that I did on the weekend, because I have also been working with some shamans and actually combining the Ayurvedic approach with the traditional shamanic medicine. And I have dieted on rose for the past 4 days, which basically means is...
Oh my God, I'm tuning into rose. You've been dieting on rose for 4 days? Oh my God.
So basically what I've done is I used the plant material, like the roots, the stem, and the leaves and the flowers of the rose. And this process was sort of, in a way revealed to me in a deep state of relaxation and meditation that this rose, I had to work with the rose. So I boiled it, I cooked it. It was almost like they showed me how to do the process, which basically means my intuitive nature, tapping into my intuitive knowledge of how it has to be done. And the process, it was quite interesting because I had the mantra coil here. I used the normal filtered water. I put shungite in the water, which is known to ward off any electromagnetic fields and actually give protection. And then I put the water onto the mantra coil and take that water and start adding it to the liquid that basically has been boiling for about 8 or 9 days in my kitchen. And then once I boil it down to a very solid decoction, and again, I wanted to experiment with it, I then filtered it. And when you do this shamanic diets, you're basically in isolation, which I did over the past 4 days, and follow a very restricted minimal diet of basically a green drink and fruit juice and water fast during that time. And I had a drink of it without the mantra coil, which was very, very strong already. But then when I actually infused the drink before I had it with the mantra coil, okay, I'll tell you actually what happens is I could feel something is going on in my brain. Like usually when I meditate, I may feel a strong sensation in the pineal gland, or I may feel some sensation that is linked to my thyroids, or sometimes even adrenal glands, depending on what goes on in my life, if I've been under stress. But then when I took the medicine that was infused with the mantra coil, it was almost like my whole brain started to rewire. So something has happened in the coherence between the right and the left hemisphere of the brain. Of course, this is all subjective experience. It's not something that is validated by research, but my whole clinical practice has always been based on going with my gut feeling, exploring myself, and listening to what I feel is right. And you can see here, this is, for example, an amethyst that I use. And then I have got the
Smoky quartz.
quartz basically here.
Beautiful crystals. Those are really high quality crystals.
They're very powerful. And this is a special piece that I got from, this is a piece of clear crystal from Himalaya. Mm-hmm. So you can even see the pink bits on it, which is because I do the remote work, when I infuse them and place them in the sunlight before I put them onto the mantra coil, I did it intuitively with the sunlight, but I never thought about putting it in water. So thank you so much for that tip, David. And then placing it on the image, or working with the intention of working on particular areas of the body. People who are sensitive, they definitely pick it up. They definitely pick it up. So it's incredible.
What's incredible is you're able to do this remotely through the quantum communication function. I have a film on Gaia TV called Quantum Communication, and it actually got hijacked on the internet, and people renamed it so they could hide it. And it got over 50 million views, and Mind Science kept hidden. I mean, people changed the name, and basically the film explores all of the different aspects of the quantum communication function, and the calibration of coherency through the different phases of meditation and the different chakra points, and when you harmonize the chakras. William Tiller's studies show how fast the quantum function operates, and I actually measured those different levels of coherency and compared to how fast they could communicate with distant star systems. And at the highest level for humans, we can communicate with Pleiades over 444 light years away instantaneously. Yes. And so it's quite amazing. When you start, the beauty of meditation is first you become incredibly sensitive. Yes. And in the early stages, you become sensitive to both the lighter and the darker energies. You can feel everything.
Yeah.
But then you learn how to not be reactive even to darker energies. And so
Yes.
when you get established in the bliss consciousness and the love vibration of the universe, the darker energies are visible, but they don't grab you very hard anymore.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. And then you can feel these little nuances in your meditation, subtle qualities that,
Yes.
because your energy field is so expanded.
Yes.
And you can work with people remotely, and you can literally put energies inside of their energy fields at a distance. And Ruth Drown, who was really the founder of radionics, I learned about her through my late friend Luke Gatto, who is now, bless him, on the other side, and a great friend of mine. Her lab was firebombed by federal agents, and she used a frequency tuning device and would find the right frequencies to treat disease. So she would take a blood sample on a coffee filter paper, unbleached, and when she hit the blood sample, and the blood was dried, it wasn't fresh, of course, people mailed it to her. But some people find that strange, and that's why a hair sample is also a much safer idea for people, and it still works because your hair contains all of your DNA.
Yes. Yes.
And it's the DNA. Yeah, the DNA emits, according to German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp, the DNA emits faster than light signals.
Wow.
Yeah.
David, may I ask you a question on the cube frequencies? What I did is I just explored, I don't know why, I used the cube frequencies at some stage during the weekend. And it was almost like, and now I have to try to remember, it was some of the cube frequencies were really able to isolate different parts of my brain. So it was like, I could sense, I have no idea, well, I've got a bit of an idea of what the cube frequencies are, but I would like to hear from you, because I was sensing the isolation of, at some stage, the right hemisphere of the brain, and then it switched from the right to the left, but everything concentrated in the frontal lobes of the brain. Would you be able to just shed maybe some light on that?
Well, when I invented the cube frequencies, first we see that the Holy of Holies in the Tabernacle of Moses was a 10 by 10 by 10 royal cubit cube. And that's where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. And then at the time of Solomon, it became 20 by 20 by 20 royal cubit cube. And then in the book called the Temple Scroll, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was proven to have been printed with some type of 3D printing technique in ancient times, because it wasn't linear ink. The measurement for the Holy of Holies became 280 royal cubits. And if you use the most accurate royal cubit to inches in the Great Pyramid itself, which is 20.605 inches per royal cubit, 280 cubits is the precise height of the finished Great Pyramid. But this is Moses' God telling him to build a cube that big. So what I did is I looked at the brain, because I'm going to answer your question about the brain. And we looked at the effect of what are called binaural audio beats.
Wow.
And I decided to go all the way from binaural to trinaural to quadrinaural to all pentanaural to hexanaural, all the way to, I think we went past 10 neural point frequencies. And then I cubed the frequencies mathematically so that each track has multiple cubed layers. And when I did it, I was in an altered state, and I can't even remember mathematically how I did it. But when I work with the cube frequencies, which I've done recently with my vortex bed, it's just, you can't see, when you get aware of subtle energy, it's an experience it's really hard to articulate with words. But it feels like all of the sacred geometries and the holographic awareness of the brain starts opening up. So it builds neural point nodes in the brain, right? It's building them as nodes so that you become more holographically aware.
Wow.
Today, most people are just it's almost like going back to the knowledge of good and evil. When Adam and Eve took in good and evil, the mistake and the poison is thinking everything has to be either or. Because either or consciousness is dual point perspectives. But as soon as you go to 3 point, 4 point, 5 point, 6 point, 7 point, you go to a 10 neural point geometry, and you have all the points that build up to that, and not just the 10 neural points, you have literally thousands of bands. You're now holographically aware, and you realize the poison is thinking everything has to be right or wrong, right? When we go to school, we're taught this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer, rather than all answers are part of the holographic awareness. And I learned a lot of that from my father, Dr. Sereda, who's a PhD in psychology at Berkeley in the 60s. And he was an assistant professor there in the early days. And before he got his PhD, he really defines, and he's in the movie Quantum Communication, how we need to leap from this whole concept of even our legal system. This is right and this is wrong. You get punished if you do this. When you go to school, you memorize facts. This is the right answer. This is the wrong answer. And really, it's more about building holographic awareness that we see and we learn from all these different angular perspectives. But our brains are trained, this is what I'm saying, we're trained to be either or, right or wrong. And so we only build 2 neural points. But when you start building more and more holographic awareness and you have actual awareness nodes, then information and experience comes into you from all different angles and through different reflective facets. And you're going to have an experience in consciousness unlike anything a person has ever experienced before. So the point of building bands of frequencies rather than what Solfeggio and what Rife did are single point frequencies that you work with one at a time. Like Rife will give you a list of 10, 11 frequencies to treat a disease, but you do this one for 10 seconds, this one 10 seconds.
Yes.
Right? But you have, what I do is I blend numbers together. So the cube is probably the most sophisticated thing I've ever built. And now when I came out of the mathematical state that I was in when I built it, I don't even remember how I did it.
Wow, this so much confirms basically what's been going on. And trust me, I have, like I said, I had no idea. I just felt, I looked at the frequencies. I just felt to work with the cube, to explore it in that state. And really, if you think about the rose medicine, it's basically, it's a herbal decoction. So it's like really getting in touch with the spirit, the energy of the plant. And by completely opening up to that energy, it's really opening up to the quantum field. It's opening up to what might be called as understanding what actually acceptance and universal love. I know universal love is a very big term, but that sense of accepting us as human beings and the experiences even today, because I came off my diet only this morning, and I must have had about 7 intakes, so over the period of 4 days, and only 3 days with the frequencies, because of course once I figured out that it really potentifies the decoction, why would I take the decoction without the frequencies? So, and I felt drawn that it needed to be the cube for some reason to actually infuse the decoction with that, with those frequencies. And then also I played a little bit with the Stargate frequencies. And funny enough, because sometimes I get up, it was full moon as well. That was the reason why I chose this phase to do this diet. And I get up in the early hours of the morning, and I like to work in the very early hours of the morning with your Stargate frequencies. And I picked the Venus frequencies, which of course, as we know, also I have got a little bit of knowledge on Vedic astrology. I've been studying consciousness and Vedic philosophy and sciences for so many years. I'm not claiming to be an astrologer, but I get a bit of a glimpse of that understanding. So I used the frequency of Venus because of the connection to love and basically the heart energy. And again, this was when I wake up in the morning and actually do my meditation for a few hours during those last couple of days.
Yes, right now, I woke up at 4 a.m. and I have
Yeah.
these really beautiful binoculars, and Venus is rising in the east, and it's so bright right now. It's
Yes.
incredibly bright. And there's
See, I love the fact that you confirm my intuitive sense, because I never really questioned. I mean, I think if I would have questioned some of my decisions in my life, I would probably not have done what I've done. But I work with my intuition and it feels right. And then somehow intellectually, the knowledge comes to me, or I will get an explanation of why I do what I do. And that's so incredible. And that's what really has inspired
See, that's why frequency is food. When you become sensitive, first you have to, break up the solidity of the structure of the person. And once they open up like a rose, like a flower, you now start, you eat your solids, you eat your meal, and that sustains the body. But what we really live on are the vibrations of everything in existence. And the God vibration is the highest, but yet inside of the God field is the creation, the God is creation, and Venus, and I find all of the 9 planets, when I calculated using NASA data, the frequency bands for all of the 9 planets, that each planet, like we think there's nobody else living on all these other planets, for example. But the moment we die, and we become just a spiritual being, we're no longer just physical and spiritual beings.
Yes.
Each of those planets, as Dante Alighieri confirmed, have within them a band of heavenly energy that is part of the next phase of learning. So Venus is, Mercury, it's interesting that Mercury is called the messenger, for example. And here's why I find that fascinating, because we start hearing cognitively at 20 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
the wavelength, the circumference of Mercury at its equator is 20 hertz. It's 19.9 something hertz, which is, we start hearing, the lowest frequency we hear is the messenger. And the Archangel Gabriel is also called the messenger in the sense that it is that first planet which has the closest relationship to the solar energy. And it moves around the sun 4 point something times for every Earth rotation around the sun, which is a year. And that's when Mercury goes retrograde, when it's behind, right? And then when Mercury goes retrograde, the next planet, of course, it's Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, is Venus, and then it's Earth, and then it's Mars, and then we go to the supergiant planets. And each of those planets have bands of frequencies that are part of there are local cosmos. So they are like a musical vibrational instrument that is part of our energy system, and we're experiencing them every day, all the time. And so now when you get up early in the morning and you're doing the Venus frequencies, that's what's rising right now at 3 something a.m. right now, and right above it is the Pleiades. And I'm taking these beautiful binoculars. I just got them. I got them to see the comet. And so you look at Venus, and then you look up, and you'll see, and you come right in on the Pleiades. You see the entire group so clearly.
Yes.
But I don't know where you are, what kind of building you're in, whether you're.
I'm in central London, but I spent actually last night time in the park just for that particular reason, to just observe and look at Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was one question though. So please tell me, why did you deliberately chose not to create any frequencies for the moon? I think I've got an idea, but I would like.
I calculated the moon's frequencies, and I totally understand what the full moon is about, which I think just happened.
Yes.
I mean, we see it really clear where we are because we're in the country, and we have a 2nd-story balcony. And we're looking at the moon through the binoculars last night with my little daughters. The moon is 30 something hertz. it's the gamma part of the brain. So the reason we don't go into deep sleep as easily during full moons is it's reflecting a lot of gamma activity on the brain. So, you know, the brain starts in delta, and then it goes to deep delta waves, and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are delta planets. And then you go into theta and alpha, beta, gamma, and then you go into super gammas, right? So the planets correspond perfectly to the different brainwave states. And those brainwaves are happening all at once at the same time, but at different planetary functions. When one planet is more prominent in energy, it will activate that function of the brain. So when I did the moon, I also calculated the frequency of several of Jupiter and Saturn's moons, because NASA, with radio telemetry, they knew the exact radius and circumference of those moons. And they're very precise numbers. In fact, one time I did the frequencies of Pluto. And I was doing the frequencies of Pluto only 2 days before the satellite it was just about to photograph Pluto and go around the backside of Pluto. And I did the frequencies of Pluto just before bed. I was in the half in, half out state, and suddenly I was in Pluto, and I saw that it had an atmosphere. And I said, it can't have an atmosphere, because it's like, you know, it's not a living planet. It can't have gases. It can't have an atmosphere. And 2 days later, when NASA's probe passed Pluto, they photographed it had an atmosphere.
Wow.
And I knew that I wasn't imagining this, Tomaz. That was the moment I knew this is not your imagination. This is actually how it works. That if you amplify the wavelength frequency of a distant planetary or solar body, part of your consciousness goes there. How much of your consciousness goes there depends on your ability to be coherent with that.
Yes.
And that's how we're able to use Project Astral Stargate frequencies and work with legendary star systems.
Wow. I mean, especially also because when I do, especially during the lockdown, really, for me, it was like a 3 months of meditation retreat. Of course, you go all through the uncertainties and all the anxieties and fears, but actually very quickly, with the help of your frequencies and the mantra coil, it was very clear on which level the work has to be done now. Whereas before, as an Ayurvedic professional and dealing with patients and people, in a way, I realized this is where the work has to happen. And we had several conversations with Dr. Daya, where we were talking that actually every single household should have a frequency coil, because of really the importance of protection and how it helps people to really stay in touch with themselves. And it's so crucial, but then again, it's so challenging to bring this wisdom into the world. And I guess the best example is me, because it's like, okay, take it, experience it, and then basically you will know. If you are a little bit aware, a little bit sensitive, you can play with it, and you will understand the impact that it has. And David, I'm really saying this, it's just incredible, and I'm so excited, and in a way looking forward to whatever is there for us or for me to discover with some of the stuff that you're doing. And because with my meditations, for example, even before knowing you and your work, I felt very much drawn to the knowledge of the ancient Atlantic civilizations of the pyramids. And because this is also because I have some past life images and experiences in my meditation that led me to that understanding. But then again, working with the frequencies of the pyramid, it's almost like as an Ayurvedic professional, I've got in my kitchen a whole shelf with all the different spices. So what has allowed me to do is your work is taking those spices and actually create my own little curry, create my own little dish, and really explore each flavor of
Right. I see what you're saying.
those.
Like there's so many frequencies in the menu that I've calculated over the years, and I'm about to come out with a new whole concept of just purely ratios. They're all ratios. I'm not even going to call them frequencies. I'm going to call them ratios. And I'm mapping them out mathematically now. And in addition to ratios, I found in the Bible, if you read Michael Drosnin's Bible Code, I'm finding there are certain passages in the Bible where there's embedded frequency codes. And for example, Matthew 6:22, I'll give you an example, which is, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. Now, when you calculate a ratio, it's simple division. So I take 22 divided by 6 is the ratio of 1 to 3.666666. And of course, 6 is divisible by 3. And this is an Archimedean infinity because the 6's go forever. And of course, the 6 is the hexagon and the cube.
Yes.
The cube has 6 sides. So we see this pyrite cube here I'll hold up. You know, this is how nature builds the building blocks of matter. And of course, it uses the cube, which is the Holy of Holies. And when I look at this number, I go, this isn't coincidence. This is a harmony. And then I looked at the ratio of the Ark of the Covenant, the height to the base, and then I looked at the ratio of the Ark of the Covenant height to the hypotenuse, and then I did the ratio of the Ark of the Covenant to the angular hypotenuse, because if you have a rectangle, you have an angular hypotenuse. So I did all the ratios on that, and I did all the ratios on the coffer in the king's chamber. And when I looked at the numbers, I was astounded. I said, whoever built this? The math is so astounding that there is such perfection. Like, you have to read, there's a book called the Archimedes Codex. I know I have it. I've seen it in the house recently. I read it years ago. And Archimedes is really the father of modern physics. I think nobody would argue that. And when you understand the sophistication in the pyramid, like, I had to get the most precise numbers from Peter Le Mesurier's early measurement in the Great Pyramid in the King's Chamber coffer. And I was trying to figure out, what is the ratio of this coffer to the pyramid? And so you take the finished height of the Great Pyramid, and I used an exact number. You can't go on Wikipedia. It's not 481 feet. It's 480 point, and arguably in the decimal series is where there's a lot of debates where the finished height of the Great Pyramid is. But using the height of the staff of Moses, which lay inside of the Ark of the Covenant, which is 2.5 cubits, right? It seems simple, but you have to use the 20.605 inches per cubit. And possibly there may be 2 different tiny variations of the royal cubit in different places in the pyramid. But for example, the height of the finished pyramid is exactly 112 staff lengths, which is exactly 112 inner Ark of the Covenant lengths. But when I was looking for the relationship of the coffer, because the coffer is similar because it's a rectangular box to the Ark of the Covenant, the coffer and the covenant have been argued to be one and the same, although they're not. And first I would measure the coffer and try and calculate its ratio to the height of the pyramid, and it didn't resolve. But when I did the X, Y, and Z measurements, with using the most precise measurements of Peter Le Mesurier, it was 1 to 34. And I just said, I can't believe this is exactly 1 to 34. And it just can't be. Like, I just can't figure this out because there's no decimals left over. And who would make this little sarcophagus with that ratio? And what does 1 to 34 mean? So when I look at 1 to 34, I don't look at it as a builder's ratio. I look at it as a frequency ratio. So then I had to calculate the frequencies that would correspond to that, and then you have to scale them. And I now have those available. The King's Chamber coffer frequencies are available. And the other significance in the pyramid to the Bible is, of course, if you look at Moses' original cube, which is the tabernacle, which was the tent of God for the Ark of the Covenant, and the staffs of the 12 tribes lay in the Ark of the Covenant, then what is 10 by 10 by 10 cubits? The Queen's Chamber. The Queen's Chamber in the pyramid is 10 by 10 by 10 cubits, and a fabric tent has to fit in there. So there's a little bit of extra room on the front of the Queen's Chamber. So she is 17.17 feet wide, which is using 20.605 inches. That's 10 cubits. And she's higher on the inside because you need to have an air gap above that. But that tabernacle fits in there perfectly is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that can't be a coincidence. And in Solomon's, in addition to the tabernacle, there's the holy place, which is a rectangle that extends beyond the tabernacle. And that was 10 by 20 cubits. And that's the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is 10 by 20 cubits, right? Except for the height, again, is higher. But that means that the God of Moses and the God of the prophets is one and the same as the architect of the King and Queen's Chamber, except for the Queen's Chamber is the most powerful. When we put all the emphasis on the King's Chamber, but but you see, the King's Chamber would be the holy place, which is where you prepare to enter the Queen's Chamber. And the Queen's Chamber is the divine feminine aspect of God, which is Shekinah. So those frequencies that I calculated within the cubic space of the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber are immensely profound. They're immensely profound. So when a lot of people will look through my massive frequency library and they don't know where to start. They're like, what is all this? Where do I start? And that's why I tell people, start with the sound of the sun, then work with the 9 planet frequencies, and then work with the pyramid frequencies, and then just start experimenting within yourself. Because
it makes perfect sense, because if you look at it, it is about the reality that we are used to, that we live in. We are surrounded by the planets. We can somehow identify the fact that those planets have got some impact on us, in particular because of the moon, and then going into the more ancient civilizations, into these mathematical calculations, which reminded me completely about the understanding of Vedic architecture, which is all about precision, is all about proportions and parts of it, and how to calculate each segment of the house in particular, to generate that harmonic frequency without the actual frequencies, just through the building side of it, and then just enhancing that through the frequency approach. It's just
then you get into building structures. Like, you can even take in your existing house where a person lives, you can take a circle of magnets and a string with a very precise radius, and you can set magnets up in a precisely measured harmonic circle. You can buy disc magnets and tape them to the floor, and you flip the positive. So magnet number 1 will have positive up, magnet number 2 positive down, magnet number 3 positive up, and that allows a sine wave to move through that magnetic field. In fact, you can set up your mantra coil, and then you can set up magnets, and it has to be a harmonic. So, see, I can take the Holy of Holies, and I can calculate its octaves musically, and therefore, if a person has a smaller space, they can have a smaller Holy of Holies. And we know this is what God did, the God of the prophets did, because the original Holy of Holies was 10 by 10. The second one was 20 by 20 cubits, right? So that's a ×2, which is a traditional octave. And then you can keep expanding on that. You can shrink it down octaves or expand it. And I can also do golden ratio octaves, which is what I prefer to use. And I just see something phenomenal when I took the Holy of Holies and multiplied it by 1 golden ratio octave. It came to 55.5 feet. I mean, 555. What are the odds of that? And it being so perfect in 3 5s. So again, when I was mentioning the sixes, the cube and is 6-sided and the hexagon is 6-sided. When we look under the microscope on the molecular scale of every element on the periodic table, most of the elements are builds of hexagons and cubes.
Yes.
Almost, and pyramids, right? So you'll see the number that predominates the most of the creation on the periodic table is the 6, and then God created the world in 6 days. It may not have been 6 days. It may have been God created the physical world with the 6, and the 6 is the cube. And if you open the cube up, if you take a paper box cube and you open it up, it's the shape of a human, right? It's the crucifix.
Yes, yes.
For the human. It opens up into and a long torso and 2 arms, and you fold it all together, and it's the cube. So we, in a sense, are cubes that are unfolded, that are opened up. So that's why, again, the cube frequencies are immensely profound. But I think people should start with the sound of the sun, go through the 9 planets, and then look at, the Great Pyramid frequency scale, which is huge. Each track has over 100 frequencies in it. And then you go to the cube and you just work with it, and you understand that our real food is vibration.
Yes.
And our physical food is created with vibrations from the sun and the stars and the earth, the 9 planets. But we don't just live on physical substance, we live on vibration. And when the body becomes ill and full of disease, or we have real physical injuries, it's vibrations and supplements together, I think, that is the best approach.
Yes, and besides of that, my plants are very happy too, because they have grown immensely.
Plants. Oh my God.
Wow, this has been really incredible, David. Like I said, I feel very grateful for Dr. Dyer for allowing me to explore with it, and it's just been incredible.
She is so kind. Dr. Dyer is so kind. She sent me so many products that really, really helped myself and my family. And she's an immensely kind person, immensely.
Definitely. Wow.
Well, this has been great, you guys. We'll have to do another meeting, Sharoz, just with Dr. Daya, because I want to keep these at 1 hour. We're just about at 1 hour right now.
Of course.
So,
yes.
Is there any last questions, Tomaz?
I'm just wondering, have you heard about the work of Professor Tony Nader and the discovery of Veda and Vedic literature in the human brain? Basically, while you were explaining the concept behind the generation of some of the frequencies, what Professor Tony Nader has done is he has looked, for example, at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and locate them in very specific areas of the brain. So I was just thinking it would be incredible to have the frequencies of some of those Yoga Sutras that actually would activate particular parts of the brain and work with those for the Ayurvedic and yoga community. I mean,
that's a whole other community that needs to become aware of this. And, one thing I know is in chanting the Vedas, and I've experienced this because I studied with a lot of Indian gurus in my meditation career. Baba Haridas, I spent years and years with, Osho, Swami Sham. Oh my God, there's so many of them that I've met, and Mother Mira, and of course Ananda. I went to India. I went to India in 1994, and I met Punjaji, and I got to stay at his ashram for a while. And I found, for me, there are certain spiritual teachers as transmitters that one person will have an awakening experience with a teacher and one person won't.
Yes.
One of my favorite is the Mother Mirror, for me personally. One of the most incredible energy connections I've ever had. But now I'm able to go into the Samadhi state regularly on my own, and it's so fulfilling and so immensely blissful that I'm really getting into states where I'm in the state of the God realized state. I'm able to experience the subtleties of the cosmos and the universe from a very unique perspective. One thing I find that the Bible is lacking is what the experience of God is like. What does it actually feel like? And when I was in Saudi Arabia, which was 2 days before the Twin Towers came down, and the Twin Towers came down, and I knew it wasn't the Arabs who took down the Twin Towers, because I was in Saudi Arabia and they were showing on the news 3 of the alleged terrorists were there. They were alive. They were in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They weren't on any airplanes. And one guy was so sweet. He was playing his guitar and he was like, my picture's on the TV as a terrorist, but I'm here at home with my family in Saudi Arabia. But within days, I had to be locked in this basement because as a Canadian, already there were killings of Americans and Canadians because the Arab world thought that the retaliation was going to be so enormous and it was going to be nuclear. And Muhammad appeared in front of me physically. And when he appeared, his energy field was so immense that I had to lower my gaze and not look at him after just 3 seconds. And I can't describe to you the holiness, the immense holiness that radiated off of him. And I got to see what he physically looked like. He was very dark. He was almost as dark as an African. And he had this blue, turban on his head. And it's light blue, very light blue. But the holiness coming off of him was immense. And my nerves started to incinerate with heat because of the transmission of energy. And had I had a staff, and this is one of the most important functions of the staff, is it's a grounding rod, right? I had already had several blinding encounters with Christ, Jesus, in previous years, where he was radiating brighter than 1,000 of our suns. And it was easier to experience that Christ blinding light in an ascended consciousness. But one time Christ appeared to me physically right in front of me to show me what he physically looked like. And it was very similar. If we know when he resurrected, he burned his image into the linen cloth and the shroud of Turin. My nerves started to burn. It was the same as like with Muhammad. But I know that if I had a staff, I would electrically ground and I would be able to withstand the meeting much longer, for longer duration. And it was the same when Aaron and Moses went up to God on the Sinai. They had to have their staff and the breastplate of gems, because there's no way to survive the intensity of those radiations without grounding and being in an elevated spiritual state, which is why God told Moses and Aaron to put the markers around the mountain and tell the people, you can't cross the markers because you're not ready. You're not trained. You can't get anywhere near this supreme God being if you're not trained and if you're not grounded. So that was another experience for me to realize that to be prepared for divine encounters, these tools to calibrate our frequency, like the height of the staff of Moses has to be precise. It's very well hidden in the Bible that it lay in 2 places. One place it lays in the Ark of the Covenant, so it's 2.5 cubits. And if it lay at the hypotenuse, you couldn't fit 12 staffs in there, very unlikely. The hypotenuse of the Ark of the Covenant is precisely 5 feet. And I find that amazing because they didn't have feet back then. But if you take 2.5 cubits times 20.605 inches, it's 51.5125 inches. And if you do the height, the a squared plus b squared is c squared, take the square root of c, that's the hypotenuse, it's 5 feet. And I just find that Like, it's exactly 5 feet. It's 5.0 something feet. Like, I just can't believe that. So there may be a significance to 5 feet as well, is what I'm saying. But if you use the traditional royal cubit or a cubit for the Ark of the Covenant, the staff of Moses, which lay in the Ark, would be tiny. He would have to be a little 5'2" man to walk around with his little staff way down here, right? So I know I'm using the right one. Also, and this work was done by a university when they found the remains of the Ark of the Covenant on Mount Ararat. Noah's Ark. It was 515 feet, and they couldn't see the 0.125, but 515 feet is using the 20.605 inches per royal cubit is 515.125 feet, and that's how I know I'm using the right measurement in the war of cubits. I mean, cubit wars get really brutal with different scholars arguing with you about which is the right cubit. But in the book of Ezekiel, when the angel appears holding a, I think it's a 6-cubit staff. It is a 6-cubit staff. The angel tells Ezekiel that God is using the cubit plus the hand. So, and that's a symbol from elbow to fingertip plus a hand. Mine happens to come almost precisely at 20.605 inches, right? Which is the royal cubit used in the Great Pyramid.
David, just before we close, I mean, what just sort of occurred to me while you were talking, is there anything, I'm just curious, where else do you see your work taking, let's say in next year, next couple of years, because this is so, I mean,
well,
for
like
me,
I said, I'm coming out with, we have a new product, which is a scepter. So it's like a mini staff, and to work with the higher frequency energies. And it's more portable than the full length staff. And we see evidence of the scepter in the ancient Egyptian world and the ancient Hebrew world as well. And then I'm coming out with the whole new series of ratios. They're not going to be called frequencies, they're ratios. And then I'm coming out with Bible codes. And when you speak of the Vedas and that system, you can take a recording of a true Vedic priest or priestess and take that recording and run it through the mantra coil with the human voice. Okay. And I've attended white tantric ceremonies where the Vedas are being recited for 4 hours, and it is immensely powerful. It is immensely powerful. And I don't know a better way to do it, because I know the goddess Saraswati used an ancient music scale that I believe is one in the same as the pyramid scale. And the reason I believe that is I believe the Egyptian people, as we see them, are from the Indus Valley, and they discovered the Great Pyramid after the flood of the time, or the last ice age. It was discovered, and it's from the previous era, and it was designed and made by one and the same as the God of the prophets and the female prophets, because there are female prophets in the Bible, and I really believe it's one and the same. So when Saraswati's music scale would come from that scale that is in the pyramid, because the Greeks also have record of Orpheus, the god of music. The Greek god of music is Orpheus. Not Morpheus is the god of dreams, but Orpheus is the god of music. And Orpheus's father took him to Egypt, and he comes back with a superior music scale to the Greeks, which enraged Zeus apparently, and Orpheus was beheaded. But the Orphics used to go door to door like Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you study the music of Orpheus, apparently it was so profound, and the frequencies in that scale were so profound, it had an effect on every living creature, from birds to reptiles to humans, and it was far superior than the Greek music scale of Apollo and Athena and Hermes. So it's incredible mythology, right? So, but I think the brown-skinned people of the Indus Valley migrated to what we call Egypt. And over time, you know, they look a little bit different. And some of them have, you know, different Middle Eastern bloodlines mixed in with them. And they created a race of people around the first pyramid. And they started building a civilization around it because they had divine contact. Mm-hmm. See, this is where you get, right now, what I'm exploring, because you asked, this is the last question, I'm exploring probably the greatest mystery in looking for the evidence of the origin of who the God of Moses really is. Oh. And all of the evidence I have is pointing to something that is really going to shock the religious world, because it's very. And I'll give you a clue. In the book of Numbers, God tells Moses to put a brass serpent upon a pole, and that would be his staff. Now, the serpent is the symbol for a coil, and brass is mainly copper with some.
Yes.
So that essentially is why we have the coil on our staffs. But why is he speaking in the language of a brass serpent? And that is a clue. And it goes all the way to the goddess Hathor, who precedes Isis. And her symbol is the serpent.
Yes,
and
yes.
It's not to be confused, because this is the language of symbols, and this is how they recorded language in these ancient times. They use symbols in their language. And so Moses, there's a huge divine feminine aspect of God that is missed. Like in the book of, it's not the book of Hebrews in the Christian Bible, it's the gospel of the Hebrews, which is written by Hebrews, describes when the Holy Spirit came upon Jesus in its entirety. The Holy Spirit is the mother. It is the divine feminine. And Jesus refers to the Holy Spirit as his mother, right? So the mother is the divine feminine goddess energy. And Shekinah, which is the ball of light that lives in the Holy of Holies, is feminine, right? It's the womb. And Jesus in the Gospel of Philip declares himself as the son of the Holy of Holies, which is the one and the same as the bridal chamber in the traditional Gospels, and that the Holy of Holies is the womb where the Virgin Mary was raised. When she was taken at the age of 3, this is in the infancy Gospels, the age of 3. I have a 4-year-old daughter who's about to turn 5, so I really appreciate what a 3-year-old girl is. She was taken at the age of 3 and raised in the temple.
Yeah.
So we know that the high priest before Caiaphas was very knowledgeable of the feminine. To raise a female child in the temple is immense. And that's because the temple in the Holy of Holies is the womb, is the mother of life. It's a sphere of life and light that lived in the temple. So when Jesus refers to his mother is the Holy Spirit, and his mother was raised in the Holy of Holies, he is the son of the Holy of Holies because his mother was raised in there. She was raised with full access, and apparently she was fed by angels. The priest would come by to feed her, and the angels had already fed her. So this function of the cube in the Holy of Holies is far more immense. I need to make a good documentary about it so that people can really see it graphically. And why it gets even more amazing, why did, I went to Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, where the premier First Nations Native American city was built. And I went in there with a Leica laser, and I measured the diameter of the circle, and it was a perfect Holy of Holies. The stone circle. How did they know that measurement? It's universal, is what I'm saying. Crosses the boundaries of what we call religion. Because God in the highest wants everyone to have this frequency and this vibration. It's not about saying my religion's right and yours is wrong. part of, see, when Christ appeared to me, he said, this is the greatest mistake that all religions have made. They have misinterpreted the meaning of the fall from grace. And the partaking of the knowledge of good and evil, they inadvertently took sides with Satan because we thought we knew what good and evil was.
Mm-hmm.
God says, never taking the knowledge of good and evil. If you do, you'll die. Well, that's because you're going to become an either or, and you're going to say that's right and that's wrong. And then another person gets together and says, no, that's right and that's wrong. Or no, that's the correct interpretation of the scripture and that's not. And so the religion divides. Islam is divided. They're fighting, killing each other because of that poisonous knowledge of good and evil. It's a trick. We have to go to the tree of life, which is the next phase of, first you go into good and evil, you're in chaos. Your mind is in chaos. It can't absolutely define what's right and what's wrong because it's stuck in either or judgment. But when you go to holographic, there is no either or anymore. You're way beyond it. You're in holographic awareness, and I believe that's the tree of life. Because then God says, now they will have to partake of the tree of life and become wise. And then, so your eyes are not open knowing good and evil. That's the trick of the serpent. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But there's a purpose to it. It's part of our awakening. So yes, right now, our whole planet is stuck in duality. My religion's right, yours is wrong. My interpretation of Islam is right and yours is wrong. And then that's why you have, in Christianity, the same. That's why you have all this fighting. Because that knowledge of good and evil split the brain, and we got stuck in either or.
Yes. Like you said at the very beginning, David, it's so important that we understand, that we see that so-called, in quotation mark, negativity. It has to be perceived, but it's almost like it waits for us at a distance, whereas we are protected within our understanding through the meditation and through the work of consciousness and through basically working with energies and frequencies where we raise our vibrations. But it's not about, and for many, many years, I lived in an ashram for 10 years. So at that time, it was almost like, yes, it's there, but you don't look at it. But what I feel is, it's really so important, and you have said it in the first or second sentence, that we recognize that negativity, because there is no duality. It's just part of that which is, and we need to recognize it. We need to be able to work with it, not being afraid of it, and really do as much as possible to work with frequencies, to raise our consciousness, to lift ourselves up to a completely different level of looking at life and being very grounded at the same time. So, because like you said, I can only imagine when you have those experiences, if you are not in your physical body, it can be so difficult to take these experiences back into your physical reality. And with the, for example, I can only speak from my own experience with the work that I've done with the plant medicine and also with my meditations and with some of the stuff that I have been doing for over 30 years. Slowly over time, I feel I'm so much grounded in those experiences. It's like my mind...
Stop right there for a second, because I want to mention something. When you say the plant medicine, remember in the Garden of Eden, in the proverbial fall from grace, once we partake of the tree of life, leaves are for the healing of the nations. That's in Revelation. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of nations. So that's God referring to plant medicine.
Yes, and David, you have the same in the Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition, they talk about soma, the experience of the drink of soma.
Soma, yeah, I know about the soma, yeah. The soma plant, I went on a real search to find out, because the descriptions of it are you probably need massive stones to crush the branches or the roots to extract the soma. So there's no way it's the marijuana plant. I even looked at the manzanita, because it has a description of like a reddish branches. I don't think anyone knows today what it is, but I've really studied it in the Vedas. What is the real soma plant? So it has to have juice in it, but it has to be of a branch or a root that requires massive stones that are described to crush it to release the juices out. And I know a lot of people think, you know, marijuana is soma, but it's not. It's not soma. And the experience people get from marijuana, I did it when I was really, you know, a young teenager. I haven't touched any, I haven't felt a need to do any plant-based medicine since I was 18. So I'm 59 this month, and I find the meditation state is so astounding that there's no need. Now, do some people see there's evidence even in the Bible and the prophets maybe partaking of certain plants to induce visions? Possibly. But what I can tell you is eventually the meditation gets to the point where...
And David, this is so right, because having been to the jungle a few times, I can recollect and reconnect with that experience so much easier through my meditation. And again, I'm really not biased. I'm really have to come back. The frequencies has helped to reestablish that connection. And
frequency
like
is more powerful than the plants. Yeah. Like some people will have an initial experience with a plant. And one of the reasons we have so many deaths with fentanyl-based drugs, which I just found out today that an associate of ours, her brother died of a fentanyl, is when you take a fentanyl, and I remember this because I had a really bad toothache in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and they give you a painkiller, and this was many years ago, and it had fentanyl. It makes you feel like you're disembodied, you're floating. And it only does that the first time, because the next day that I took the painkillers, it was about half of that really nice body high where you feel kind of, you do feel light, and you feel like you're not over-identified with physical sensations. And what interests me about it is I realize this, I go into a state way beyond that at this age every single day. I go from my normal, you know, cognitive mind, and I do my meditation practice, and I'm there. And if these people who are addicted to fentanyl knew this, that your body can do this. You do, like, I know you mentioned you have some breath practices you do, and what I've done for the last 10 years, I mean, I've done hundreds of rebirthings, the full Leonard Orr rebirthing technique. And then I got into this longer, slower, deep breath practice that every 2 months, I start 30 days of 45 minutes a day of this breathing technique. Mm-hmm. And it's I take sips of air, expand the chest, hold it just for 2 seconds, really gently, let it all out. And I repeat that to, you know, an audio track that I created, and that's 45 minutes of that every day. And then from that, you do the sounds, the toning, and then you sit in the silence. And then the next 2 months, I just do my regular practice. And that, adding the breath technique, and sometimes even if you just do 5 or 10 minutes before you meditate, if a person keeps doing this, the high that they're getting from these fentanyl drugs is readily available within your own awareness.
Absolutely. David, can you share that soundtrack with us, please? I'm very keen to...
Well, yeah, I have it. It's in, Shiroz, can you send him the link to the meditations? It's called The Breath of God.
Sure, certainly.
See, our breath, the ruach in ancient Hebrew, that when God breathed the Spirit of God into Adam's nostrils and Eve's nostrils to animate the Spirit of God is in the original breath of the original creation. And I believe Adam and Eve were a regenesis. They're not the first humans, because the first humans go back millions of years. But there are these periods called regenesis, where the human is reanimated and reperfected. And that regenesis of the modern, much less hairy humans, I'll call them, and contained the original Spirit of God in the breath. So that means in our breath that we can access the Spirit of God.
Wow.
And so the technique that I developed through years of practicing, and this is way before the Wim Hof technique came around. I mean, I've been doing breathing since the 70s, right? But Wim Hof is now the breath guy, but the technique I'm teaching you is different, because what it does is it slowly expands the capacity of the lung. So when you breathe in through the nose, you can expand the belly first, which is a yogic breath, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the chest, just expand, expand. You don't force the air out, but you don't just let it all fly out.
Yes, yes.
And you're going to do this to guided meditation, music, and you're going to move through the energy centers of the body. And then you're going to go through the body parts in round 2. And then in round 3, which are 15 minutes each, then you're just going to let go of your whole awareness field and expand. If people do this, you don't need fentanyl. You don't need fentanyl.
I will definitely explore that, David. I will definitely explore that.
And that with the frequencies combined, I think, see, this is what's missing for me in the biblical practices, even in the Christian Bible, is there are no descriptions of what it felt like to have your sins forgiven and be turned into a body of light. Mm-hmm. And it's descriptions that entice people to come from a life of chaos and sin and ignorance into harmony and order, so they can have this experience as their real food on a daily basis. And I, you know, in my 5 or 6 meetings with the divine Christ, and one with Muhammad, and many with the Virgin Mary, many meetings with the Virgin Mary, and some with the apostles, what it feels like to be in the presence of the Virgin Mary is just blinding love, like tears pouring down my face, tears of absolute love, unbounding, blinding love. And this is what I tell people in this argument on the internet. Was Jesus black? Was he white? Was he brown skin? It doesn't matter. It's what he felt like. It's what he felt like. Are you ready to feel this much love for humanity and not hatred for every single race on the planet?
Well, David,
Yes.
I very much look forward to exploring more of your incredible equipment that you have created. And I feel very grateful that I have been introduced to your work. And it's just really so exciting in this challenging time that we open ourselves up to these possibilities, these dimensions, which have been around us for such a long time, and we just have completely closed and shut ourselves off. And it is through your work that more and more people will have access to those experiences where there's no room for violence, there's no room for fear or anxiety. And this is where true healing really takes place. And again, I feel very grateful, and thank you so much for your time, David.
So much for your authenticity. You're so authentic on this path. And I want to say too, in the Pistis Sophia, there's clear evidence of the first mantra coil being built, and the way they did it, the way they made forms and pendants and jewelry, is they would etch in marble this flower pattern for this coil, and they poured 4 or 5 metals combined by melting them down in a crucible, and they poured it into the form, and when it cools down, they had a star coil.
Wow.
And this existed on the floor of the temple.
Wow.
And I need to find that exact passage, because the Pistis Sophia is a massive book, and when I read it, I said, you know, there was a function for this coil in the floor of the temple. And so I look at the coils that are God-inspired as living emitters, living resonant field emitters, resonating flower geometries. They're alive. I don't look at them as dead technology. They're living technology.
Wow.
Without losing my voice from talking. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. So nice to see you, Shamim, Sharoz. I'm gonna get back to my kids now. And wonderful day. Have a great day.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Shamim.